Hello, and welcome to the Campus Technology Insider Podcast. I'm Rhea Kelly, Editor-in-Chief of Campus Technology, and your host. At Ohio State University, students developed a list of 10 ways that instructors can use the learning management system more effectively, calling it Carmen Common Sense, Carmen being the name given to the university's Canvas LMS. These basic guidelines aim to make courses more consistent, predictable, easier to navigate, and generally more student-friendly. For this episode of the podcast, I spoke with Sam Craighead, Associate Director of Professional Learning in Ohio State's Office of Technology and Digital Innovation, about understanding the student perspective, supporting faculty with research-based practices, and the impact of instructional design on student success. Before getting into that conversation, I thought I should quickly run through the 10 Carmen Common Sense guidelines to give a little context. They are: 1. Upload the course syllabus to the LMS and provide it as a downloadable file. 2. Upload assignments with instructions and clear due dates. 3. Enter grades into the LMS when grading is complete. 4. Use a consistent mode of communication and mention it in class. 5. Organize course materials into modules according to content matter. 6. Remove unused tabs or pages from the course navigation. 7. Organize the course homepage with instructor contact information. 8. Utilize clear and consistent naming conventions for assignments and files. 9. Use open educational resources when feasible. And 10. Leverage the resources and support that are available from the university. And another brief note, you can hear more from Ohio State at our upcoming Campus Technology Leadership Summit. On Wednesday, February 23rd, we are hosting a series of presentations focused on the many facets of digital transformation in higher ed. The session, Tech Tools for Student Wellness and Holistic Support, will feature Jessica Phillips, Interim Director of Learning Programs and Digital Flagship at Ohio State. She'll share how the university launched a student wellness app that offers tools and resources in an easily accessible format, and made sure that students were directly involved in the design, development, and ongoing improvement of the app. You can register for the summit for free at campustechnology.com/summit. And now, here's my chat with Sam. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rhea. Thanks for having me.
So I thought, to sort of give us some background, could you talk a little about yourself and your role in the Office of Technology and Digital Innovation?
Sure. Yeah. So I lead our professional learning team, and we coordinate learning opportunities and resources designed to help educators at Ohio State to leverage technology, to provide high quality learning experiences, to create inclusive online and technology rich learning environments, and to make evidence based decisions about teaching with technology. So it's sort of an intersection of educational development and instructional design and ed tech, and sometimes a little bit of IT in there too, because our department does that. But yeah, that's, I think, sums it up.
So I read recently that Ohio State has developed a set of learning management system guidelines called Carmen Common Sense. Could you kind of give me the background on how that came about?
It originated as sort of a collaboration between one instructor, who her name's Nicole Kraft. She's from our School of Communications at Ohio State, and with members of our undergraduate student government. So undergraduate students, and they kind of came to us to see like, hey, can you do something with these? How can we kind of get these out to people? And so we work together to help bring attention to Carmen Common Sense. Initially as part of a fall teaching showcase that we did before COVID. And then we also worked to create a new home for their recommendations by turning it into a teaching topic on our Teaching and Learning Resource Center site.
My understanding is that there were surveyed students and got a lot of feedback about their experiences using the LMS. And I guess I should also add that I think Carmen is your instance of Canvas. Although it seems to me that these guidelines are pretty universal for any learning management system. But I'm just wondering what it was like to survey students about their experiences and what kinds of criticisms or complaints did they have?
So the guidelines and recommendations, these were wholly developed by students, and they were the result of some surveys that they did internally. So I haven't seen the surveys. I don't know the methodology, but like the way that they kind of talked about them, it did feel like it was like semi-formal. So I don't know what the sample size was, how many students they heard from. We just know that this was folks within undergraduate student government. Certainly, they talked to other students there, and I think there was some amount of them getting feedback from other students across the university. So I guess this goes back to my previous answer. I probably just builds on it a little bit. They worked with that instructor, Nicole Kraft, and she helped them kind of figure out how to package that and how to brand it. And then we worked to kind of provide some feedback and make sure that what they were suggesting was going to be in line with university policies and guidelines. So while we didn't personally get involved in the development of that survey, we were involved in helping take what they learned from it and the recommendations that they were providing and try to help shape it into something that like aligned with what we had heard from students and seen from students, and also that's going to align to like what we know we can tell people is like this is safe to do, these are good practices, this lines up with what we know. So yeah, all that said, like I do have a lot of other experience separate from this where we have done focus groups with students on other topics, and it the way that they responded and the types of feedback they provided here really seemed to align to similar things that we've heard from students elsewhere, whether it was about the learning management system or it was about using wireless internet on campus or other kind of things around technology. So while we didn't design the survey, it does seem very aligned to the types of things that we've heard from students. So it was really certainly believable and helpful to be able to have something like that. In a lot of ways, we found it useful that we didn't do that work, right? Because now it very much is like it's students like harnessing the student voice and providing that guidance. Like it really feels like a more powerful message to instructors to say, this isn't the tech office or the legal office or someone else saying you need to do this or you need to be compliant. This is like these are the students that you've taught. This is their experience, and we want to make sure we're just helping you kind of hear that from them.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that students had that agency to, think of this as a problem that needed to be solved and to kind of come up with these guidelines on their own. So, were there any of the sort of guidelines that they come up with that surprised you and made you think like, I can't believe faculty are doing things this way?
So my first job at Ohio State was doing classroom technology support, and I did that for quite a few years. I've met with, at this point, probably realistically hundreds of different instructors in different ways there, and I've done work with instructional design and with tech implementation. So I've met with faculty in a lot of different ways and seen a lot of different things. And as a result, I'm not particularly surprised by I think any of it at this point. There's very little that will surprise me in that realm, and I don't mean that as a it's all bad and I've seen the worst or anything like that. Just like I've seen like a full spectrum of it, and there's not a whole lot that would be surprising to me in particular. But I'm also in a position now more to guide the direction of what our programming is. So like we've also separate from whatever faculty's attitudes might be and things that they might be doing in their courses, what I am able to do is say, here's what we could do different about how we provide training and how we provide resources that can be more helpful to them, so that like when we hear about some of these like hopefully outlier incidents of like courses being disorganized and hard for students to navigate, that we can provide more guidance and recommendations that are going to be like more applicable and easy to take and apply to their course. So again, not to say that like what we did before was terrible. It was just we grew out of IT, and IT is a more reactive and responsive part of like working with technology. It's about folks saying I'm struggling with this thing, please help me with it, or this is broken, fix it. So a lot of what we did was more focused on tech tutorials or demonstrations of what our tech might do, and then like what from a technical standpoint we might recommend. But now we focus a lot more on like okay, what does the scholarship of teaching and learning tell us about what would actually be the best thing to do here? Sometimes it's not to use technology. So now we're more focused on specific recommendations, like similar to what you'd see in Carmen Common Sense, that are going to be based on those best practices, and they're more about supporting the course goals and the learning outcomes and student success than saying here's all the things you can do with technology, and here's what we would suggest as people who know technology but maybe don't know teaching or don't know your subject matter. We're trying to like find the space in between all of those to bring all those together so that what we provide is going to be based in something that we know is going to support students. It is going to be based in research that we know is like evidence that this practice is going to work, and that it's also going to be good practices and policies aligned to like what we know is going to work with the tech. So my long answer to maybe not exactly the same question, but that sort of I've had enough years to see a whole spectrum of good and bad use of tech in classrooms and good and bad use of the LMS. And what I think we're focused on now is like how can we make it easier for them to know what good use of that is. And that's not just it can do this. Here's all the capabilities. You're the expert. You have a PhD. You go figure it out. It's okay, here's what we know. Here's what the students told us. Here's what the research tells us. Here's what we know from the platform. The like Canvas that we use on campus. How can we combine those things and just say the easier we make this for you to digest, the better we know the experience is going to be. Like we can reduce the amount of weird outlier situations and possible bad experiences in a classroom if we reduce the amount of difficulty they have learning how to do that well.
So let's talk about some specific examples of the guidelines that the students came up with. Some of them truly sound like basic common sense, like uploading a course syllabus or uploading assignments with clear due dates. One of the ones I thought was kind of interesting was utilizing clear and consistent naming conventions for assignments and files. Could you talk a little bit about that one and why it's important?
It's all about creating experiences that are clear and consistent. So throughout those recommendations, even going back to the syllabus that you already mentioned, it's sharing those expectations up front for letting the students know like what they're going to expect for the class, how this is going to work. So the rest of those recommendations, even around naming conventions, assignments, and files, like that's a logical extension of that. Um, Part of reducing the student's cognitive load. So the less time you spend trying to figure out how to navigate the LMS, and the less time you're spending trying to figure out like what exactly am I supposed to be doing. You're able to focus more on engaging with the course content and the activities to like meet the learning outcomes. So it's a learner experience, user experience. It's all kind of part of the same thing here. We bring that same type of focus to user experience on our teaching and learning resource center by using templates and a consistent voice and style through the site. And so it's more based in the idea of like good design is good if you don't think about the design when you're engaging with something. So it's a similar practice that we're recommending to educators that we're trying to model through the resources we create, but that we're sort of saying the same thing for your students. If you want them to write an essay, make the prompt clear and make it make sense and align to a rubric so that they know like what they're doing, like what they're working towards makes sense to them, and they don't have to think about where's the file for that, or what is this one that says rubric.pdf. Like there's it's being consistent and clear in what you put into your course makes it easier for people to navigate it. If you do it in one module, do it the same in the next module. So the students are learning, early on, like what the structure is going to be to expect, and it's less work for them on, the part that is just like using the LMS, and more work, more focused on the actual subject matter of your course.
Yeah, it seemed to me that it was about, if you have an opportunity to put information in the LMS, you should do it, whether that's the syllabus or the assignments, even the instructor contact information. That was another one of the guidelines, and grades, like putting grades. I suppose I never had an LMS when I was in college, so
Mm.
but like it totally makes sense that why make students go somewhere else, like to the student information system, wherever grades go, when they could see it right within the context of their course.
I think something I can, I guess, add to that that might be useful is just what you just mentioned. I went back to finish my degree in my mid to late 20s, and so I did get to experience the LMS. And a lot of what we heard from students in talking about Carbon Common Sense aligned with my actual experience, which was not everybody uses it. So not every course you take necessarily has, like, they by default get like a shell in Canvas, but they may not populate it, or maybe they just throw the syllabus in there, or maybe they dump a bunch of files in there. And so I think, again, this is pointing back to, if one instructor is making their course more navigable and consistent by, organizing their modules and files and titles in one way, how great would it be if all the instructors do that? So when you're like, all of my courses actually make sense to me. Like, it's one thing for a course by course basis to work its own way, but I think that's kind of what the students were aiming for too with these guidelines, which is how can we make it so whenever we take any class, we get to have at least some baseline level of a common experience. And I think that's what they were looking for, is like, what's like what the lowest, you know, bar that we could ask people to reach, so that we can, make our jobs trying to take your course and engage in your course just a little bit more pleasant and easy, and focused on the subject matter of the course, and not the tools and the platforms that you're trying to interact to get to it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting also the link between that student experience and, actual issues of student success and how, barriers to their success. And there's a line on the Carmen Common Sense website that says, bad Carmen habits can be a barrier to student success. And it just made me want to ask you, do you ever think that these guidelines should be a little stronger? Like, should they be requirements? If it's, because those are kind of high stakes in terms of it can really impact student success. So, how do you walk that line between needing to encourage and support faculty to do things in a certain way, but also wanting to make sure that students are getting the best possible experience in the LMS?
So I feel like I've definitely been at, conferences, or, other places with peers from other institutions, or I've certainly heard people say it within our own institution. They're like, why can't we just make everybody do this one thing, or like, this small list of things? And I guess, for one, we're not empowered to, and that's, I think, fine. I think the amount of pushback we would see if we attempted to do that, we would end up probably losing more people than we might win over. Or again, then are people just doing things because they're told they have to? So the approach that we've really tried to take, is about building, self-efficacy and an understanding of the sense of purpose, and to do this because it's actually, you want to, because your students want you to. So I'm not much on the side of mandates for, educator, like blanket mandates across the board, and certainly I don't think the educators at our institution would want me to be. So we kind of say, that's not our place. If that ever gets to the point of what comes up and what college leaders wants to do, we're going to find the way to make sure that we communicate things in the most similarly. We're going to focus on student success. We're going to focus on the purpose behind it, why it's going to be useful, how we can make it as easy for you and painless for you as possible. But I feel like the what I would hope would lead to a better student experience is, real buy-in from instructors that they want to do something. Because, the other thing that comes with the mandate is the feeling of, well, I was forced to do this and I don't want to do any more of this. The guidelines at Carmen Common Sense are a starting point, right? There's still so many more things you could do to make your course engaging, and to help your students meet your learning outcomes that go well beyond what these students have articulated. And if we want to get people to take that next step eventually, we need them to feel good about taking that first step. So, working towards, using this as scaffolding for something they could build off of later. So this is right. This is like level one. If you can do this, great. And if you feel good about it and you see the point of it, then you're going to be more interested in exploring what you can do beyond that. And I think that gives us a better place to build from. So we have certainly seen, and this is where, separate from Carmen Common Sense, we developed a page called Keep Teaching that's also on this resource center. And that was in response to the pandemic. And what we saw, and what we saw in many institutions, was, we're very quickly pivoting to a new way of teaching we haven't done before, adoption of tools and practices that many haven't done. And we, for years, we've provided these tools and said, I wish more people use them. Very quickly, everybody had to. And we kind of used a similar approach to Carmen Common Sense, which was do these 5 things. Like, let's boil this down to just, you've got 2 weeks. We're switching to emergency response teaching. Let's focus on some core things you can start from. And what we found, and what we kind of thought through when we listed those out, was what are some things that are still going to be useful after this is over, whenever that is, which still seems to be ongoing. But like really thinking about it from that standpoint of like, yes, it would be great if everybody did this bare minimum, but if we can get lots of people excited about the bare minimum, they're going to be excited. They're going to be excited about level 2, level 3, like doing these like more robust things in their courses. And throughout all this, they've also learned to engage with us. They've built some self-efficacy because they saw this thing, they did the steps that were easy to them, and now they're becoming more comfortable and familiar in a system that they can take some ownership of and do more in over time.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, that the Carmen Common Sense, it's pretty bare bones, but it's actually a foundation for going to the next level. The other thing I noticed about that website is I really liked how the Common Sense guidelines provided kind of a framework that you use to then point faculty to a whole variety of resources to help them with all of those, you know, um, all of those basics. You had how-to articles, templates, videos. Can you talk more about the kinds of support services that you provide to faculty?
Yeah, so the site that the page is featured on is our Teaching and Learning Resource Center, which is technically a newer site. It's been around for a couple years. We launched it during the pandemic, but it was part of an ongoing project to revise our department's resource center that was really more technology focused. And what we wanted to do with that was to create a hub with any resources that are going to be relevant to instructors across our institution. So not just the areas that we're responsible for and have expertise in, but the ones that branch into like the more specifically pedagogical that don't have to do with technology, to creative writing and just writing in general for courses, to the science, just STEM and other parts of the sciences. So we're working with, I think at this point, about 10 other units to develop content for that site. And really the goal is similar to Carbon Common Sense. Let's make an easy starting point for people that's consistent, that's clear, that's easy to navigate, that has all the things that you just described. So we have very specific templates that we repeat so that the experience is going to be consistent. So if you read the Carbon Common Sense teaching topic, when you go to read another teaching topic, you're going to experience a similar thing where we start with sort of a storytelling opening to draw people in, whether it's from a student perspective or an instructor perspective. We have starting those with a similar entry point, then moving on into sharing some of the research behind that particular topic, and then moving on to also sharing examples from the school, from different parts of OSU. So from faculty you may know, here's something that they did in their course, and then also examples from the students. And then, yeah, again, links out to templates, to videos, to how-tos. It's really about how do we create a consistent way of experiencing that, regardless of the topic. So it doesn't have to be about technology. It doesn't have to be about the LMS. It could be about, understanding microaggressions that might happen in your class, and how do you address something like that. So it's really like understanding that all of these things are part of an instructor's toolkit when they're teaching, and how do we really think about those holistically rather than here's the tech stuff, we're going to give you tech ideas, here's another group you go talk to over there. Like, how do we really put this all in one place? And that also includes, like, there's sections there where we have contact forms for all the different partnering units. Those are linked out on those pages. So it's really about, creating an easy starting point for people, making it consistent. So regardless of if it's tech or if it's not, they know how a page is going to look. They know what to expect when they click on something. They know where it's going to take them, and they also know this is going to be of a high quality and connected to like real evidence that says if I adopt this practice, there's proof that it's actually if I'm doing this correctly and I'm doing it in a way that's connected to my course learning outcomes, it's actually going to like lead to student success. So it's really about actually bringing those practices that support student success into one place and connecting them to each other.
Do you have a sense of sort of the response among faculty to all these resources and guidelines that have been available to them?
Sure. So, to go back to the Carmen Common Sense part, we had really solid attendance at, I think I mentioned earlier, we did a teaching showcase. This was back in 2019. So when those recommendations were first put out there by students, we have an annual conference called Innovate where we talked about it as part of a related event there. And then Nicole and some other instructors have presented at that conference, which, has, I think at that point when we were still doing in person, close to 1,000 attendance each year. And it was a popular session there. And, then I think beyond that, she also started to teach a short course for faculty just based on Carmen Common Sense. So it was an instructor telling other instructors, here's how you adopt these recommendations. And that was in collaboration with the teaching center at our university, which was also popular. And we did have a lot more plans for focusing on promoting that. And then, of course, COVID hit. So that's when we developed that Keep Teaching page that I mentioned. So the traffic to what we can mostly understand about people using these resources, especially during the pandemic, is through site traffic. And we have, I think, per semester, it's over the last year been like 60 to 65,000 unique users of the site, and those are high traffic pages that get quite a lot of traffic at specific times in the term and consistently throughout the year. What we're also working on now too is like that within that partnership for the Resource Center, we're developing a joint survey that we're going to be sending out this year at the end of the semester to get an idea from all instructors about how they engage with those resources, what they like about it, what kind of gaps they're seeing, what do they need more of. So long way of saying we are hoping to learn more. Right now we know we get a lot of site traffic. People spend a lot of time on the pages, and we're going to be finding out more about what do they need more of, what do they appreciate most, and hopefully we'll have a better answer to that in about a year. So yeah, we'll be doing that survey in April, and then doing the analysis and recommendations this summer. So we will know a lot more in the very near future.
And do you have any final advice for, I guess, taking the student experience into account when teaching with technology?
Yeah, so I think, and hopefully I'm not being too repetitive by saying the same things throughout this, but considering student feedback as one component it's really important, and to also take that and look at it alongside what the research says, to look at it alongside how have instructors addressed this already at my institution. So where you can find those case studies, connect with the actual instructors at your institution, connect that to what the students are telling you, look at what the evidence says about what are good practices, and look at the leadership landscape of your institution. So there's, I guess, sort of the political side of it is what you know from what we're hearing from students, how much of that aligns to what we know of best practice? How much of that aligns to what instructors are telling us? How much of what we might want to recommend aligns to what we think our college and university leaders are willing to put forward? And combine those together, and the more aligned those are, I think the more powerful whatever recommendations you can provide are, which again means the more powerful and the more, I guess, adoptable what you're recommending people do is, the better chance that people can actually do it, and the better chance we have of actually addressing that student feedback. So I guess, yeah, in short, look, think of it as one part of that larger ecosystem of the university, and make sure that you consider it in that context and then act accordingly.
I like what you said about it has to be doable, because otherwise no one's going to do it, and then it doesn't matter what what the practice is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on. That was great.
Thanks, Rhea.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Rhea Kelly, and this was the Campus Technology Insider Podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Stitcher, or visit us online at campustechnology.com/podcast. Let us know what you think of this episode and what you'd like to hear in the future. Until next time.